boys and girls, this story is called The Polar Express by Chris Van Allsburg, and I do want to share it. One of our traditions at Burton Hill Elementary is to read this story. We used to watch the movie too, and we do some activities, some pictures, and some work with the Polar Express. And this also has the Caldecott Medal. So you may have seen the movie. I'm not sure if you've read the book, but it's a tradition of ours to read it. So let's read it. It says, The Polar Express, written and illustrated by Chris Van Allsburg. Es un libro compartido todos los años. Y vamos a leer la tradición en las Navidades. On Christmas Eve many years ago, I lay quietly in my bed. I did not rustle the sheets. I breathed slowly and silently. I was listening for a sound a friend had told me I'd never hear. The ringing bells of Santa's sleigh. There's no Santa, my friend had insisted, but I knew he was wrong. Late that night, I did hear sounds, though not of ringing bells. From outside came the sounds of a hissing steam and squeaking metal. I looked through my window and I saw a train standing perfectly still in front of my house. Aunque su amigo dijo, no hay Santa, pero el niño sí vio un tren. It was wrapped in an apron of steam. Snowflakes fell lightly around it. A conductor stood at the open door of one of the cars. He took a large pocket watch from his vest, then looked up at my window. I put on my slippers and robe. I tiptoed down the stairs and out the door. All aboard, the conductor cried out. I ran up to him. Well, he said, are you coming? Where? I asked. Why, to the North Pole, of course, was his answer. This is the Polar Express. I took his outstretched hand and he pulled me aboard. So el conductor del tren invitó al niño para que se paseara. The train was filled with other children. Estaba lleno con otros niños. All in their pajamas and nightgowns. We sang Christmas carols and ate candies with Nuncan centers as white as snow. We drank hot cocoa as thick and rich as melted chocolate bars. Outside, the lights of towns and villages flickered in the distance as the Polar Express raced northward. So los niños participaron y tomaron chocolate caliente y comieron dulces mientras se hacían el camino para el Polo Norte. Soon there were no more lights to be seen. We traveled through cold, dark forests where lean wolves roamed and white-tailed rabbits hid from our train as it thundered through the quiet wilderness. So van por el bosque súper callado. Y ven los conejos se esconden. Y ellos van por el camino. We climbed mountains so high it seemed as if we would scrape the moon. But the Polar Express never slowed down. Faster and faster we ran along, rolling over peaks and through valleys like a car on a roller coaster. Subió todas las colinas rapidísimo, sin parar. The mountains turned into hills, the hills to snow-covered plains. We crossed a barren desert of ice. The great polar ice cap lights appeared in the distance. They looked like the lights of a strange ocean liner sailing on a frozen sea. There, said the conductor, is the North Pole. So las montañas se hicieron colinas con nieve. Pasaron el agua y el agua estaba congelada y pasaron por la ciudad, ¿verdad? The North Pole It was a huge city, standing alone at the top of the world, filled with factories where every Christmas toy was made. At first we saw no elves. They are gathering in the corner of the city, the conductor told us. That's where Santa will give the first gift of Christmas. Who receives the first gift? We all asked. The conductor answered, he will choose one of you. Y el tren paró en la ciudad del Polo Norte. Y el señor, el conductor, él les explicó que Santa Claus estaría ahí y él va a compartir el primer regalo de la Navidad con uno de algunos de los niños del tren. Look, shouted one of the children, the elves. The elves! Outside we saw hundreds of elves. As our train drew closer to the center of the North Pole, we slowed to a crawl. So crowded were the streets with Santa's helpers. Where the Polar Express could go no further, we stopped and the conductor led us outside. Estaba lleno, llenísimo de todos los ayudantes enanos, ¿verdad? De Santa. We pressed through the crowd to the edge of a large open circle. In front of us stood Santa's sleigh. The reindeer were excited. They pranced and paced, ringing the silver bells that hung from their harness. It was a magical sound, sounding like nothing I'd ever heard. Across the circle, the elves moved apart, and Santa Claus appeared. The elves cheered wildly. He marched over to us and pointed to me and said, "Let this fellow have this fellow here." He jumped into his sleigh. The conductor handed me up. I sat on Santa's knee, and he asked, "Now, what would you like for Christmas?" So todos estaban afuera mirando y esperando a Santa Claus. Las campanas, las cascabeles que estaban sobre los caballos sonaban ruidos bonitos como magia. A lo último, Santa le llamó al niño y lo sentó con él y le preguntó, ¿qué te gustaría para la Navidad? I knew that I could have any gift I could imagine, but the thing I wanted most for Christmas was not inside Santa's giant bag. What I wanted more than anything was one silver bell from Santa's sleigh. Then I asked Santa, smiled. When I asked, Santa smiled. Then he gave me a hug and told an elf to cut a bell from the reindeer's harness. The elf tossed it up to Santa. He stood holding the bell high above him and calling out, "The first gift of Christmas." So Santa le preguntó al niño, y el niño pidió, él podía pedir cualquier cosa, pero pidió una de las campanas, cascabel, de el trineo de Santa Claus. A clock struck midnight as the elves roared their approval. Santa handed the bell to me, and I picked it up and put it into my bathrobe pocket. The conductor helped me down from the sleigh. Santa shouted out the reindeer's name and cracked his whip. His team charged forward and climbed into the air. Santa circled once above us, then disappeared in the cold, dark polar sky. So as soon as we were back inside the Polar Express, the other children asked to see the bell. Los niños querían la campana. I reached into my pocket, but the only thing I felt was a hole. I had lost the silver bell from Santa Claus's sleigh. Let's hurry outside and look for it, one of the children said. But the train gave a sudden lurch and started moving. We were on our way. Oh, se le perdió por el bolsillo, porque su bolsillo tenía un hueco. Pero ya se iban y no podían bajar. It broke my heart to lose the bell. Ah, se lastimó mucho perder su campanita. When the train reached my house, I sadly left the other children. I stood at my doorway and waved goodbye. The conductor said something from the moving train, but I couldn't hear him. What? I yelled out. He cupped his hands around his mouth. Merry Christmas, he shouted. The Polar Express let out a loud blast from its whistle and sped away. On Christmas morning, my little sister Sarah and I opened our presents. When it looked as if everything had been unwrapped, Sarah found one last box, small box, behind the tree. It had my name on it. Inside was the silver bell. There was a note. Found this on the seat of my sleigh. Fix that hole in your pocket. Signed, Mr. C. I shook the bell. It made the most beautiful sound my sister and I have ever heard. But my mother said, "Oh, that's too bad." "Yes," said my father, "it's broken." When I'd shaken the bell, my parents had not heard a sound. So, cuando el niño tocó la campanita, la hermana y el niño escucharon un sonido bien bonito, pero su mamá y su papá no escucharon la campana. At one time, most of my friends could hear the bell, but as years passed, it fell silent for all of them. Even Sarah found one Christmas that she could no longer hear its sweet sound. Though I've grown old, the bell still rings for me, and it does for all who truly believe. So él explica que aún una vez todos los niños escuchaban, sus amigos, la campanita, pero con el tiempo ya no lo escuchaban más. Hasta su hermana Sara también ya no lo escuchaba. Pero el niño sí, aunque ya era grande, él todavía escucha el sonido de la campana. La campana hace su ruidito si tú todavía crees en él. El fin. The end.